My name is Diana Holloway. I am 31 years old. At my own father's funeral, my husband's family tried to steal everything he left behind while I was still standing at his grave. They had papers ready, lawyers waiting, and my husband, the man I trusted completely, had already signed. Before I tell you what I did next, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and tell me your country in the comments. Now, let's begin. The morning of my father's funeral was cold and gray, the kind of cold that settles into your bones and stays there long after you've gone inside. I stood at his graveside in black, holding flowers he would have said were too expensive, white roses. He always liked simple things. He always said the simplest things were the most honest. My father, George Holloway, was not a wealthy man, but he was the most honest man I have ever known. He spent 40 years working as a civil engineer, quiet work, bridges, roads, things that hold people up without asking for credit. He never owned a luxury car, never wore an expensive watch, never cared about any of that. What he cared about was one thing: the land. 12 acres outside of Nashville, Tennessee. Land that had been in our family for 3 generations. Land his own father had worked with his hands. Land he had promised, since I was old enough to understand promises, would one day be mine. "That land is your foundation, Diana," he used to say. "No matter what happens, you will always have ground to stand on." I believed him. I should have been more careful about who was standing beside me. I met Richard Calloway 4 years ago at a charity event in Nashville. He was charming, confident, the kind of man who walks into a room and immediately knows where the power is. His family owned a real estate development company, Calloway Properties, one of the largest in Tennessee. He pursued me for months. Flowers, dinners, long drives, phone calls that lasted until 2 in the morning. He told me I was different from everyone he had ever met. He told me my simplicity was what he loved most about me. I should have noticed even then that he used the word simplicity like it was a compliment. It wasn't. We married 18 months later. Small wedding. My father walked me down the aisle. He shook Richard's hand firmly and looked him in the eyes and said, "Take care of my daughter." Richard smiled. "Always, sir." My father nodded slowly. He was a good judge of character, but even he missed this one. For the first 2 years, everything seemed fine. Richard worked long hours, traveled often, but he came home. He was present enough, attentive enough. It was small things that started first. Comments about my father's land. "That property is sitting there doing nothing, Diana. 12 acres in that location. Do you know what that's worth right now? Your father should really think about what happens to it after." He never finished that sentence, but I heard what he didn't say. I told him clearly, that land is not for sale. Not now, not ever. He would nod, drop the subject, but it always came back. Different angle, different timing, same destination. I ignored the feeling growing quietly in my chest. My father got sick in the spring. Quietly at first, the way strong people get sick. Without telling anyone, without asking for help, without wanting to be a burden. By the time I found out, it was already serious. I drove to Nashville immediately, stayed with him, cooked his meals, sat beside him in the evenings the way he used to sit beside me when I was small. Richard visited twice in 4 months. Both times he stayed less than a day. Both times he spent more time looking at the land than sitting with my father. I noticed. I said nothing. My father passed on a Tuesday morning, quietly, peacefully, holding my hand. The last thing he said to me was, "The land is yours. Don't let anyone take your foundation." I squeezed his hand. "I won't, Dad." He closed his eyes, and he was gone. The funeral was 3 days later. Richard stood beside me at the graveside, his hand on my back, his face appropriately sorrowful. His family stood nearby. His father, Harold Calloway, a large man with cold eyes and a firm handshake. His mother, Patricia, always dressed perfectly, always smiling the kind of smile that never reached her eyes. His brother, James, who worked as the company's legal director. They had all come, I thought, for a moment, that they had come for me, to support me. I was wrong. It was after the burial. We had returned to my father's house, family, neighbors, old friends filling the rooms, food on every table, stories being shared, the particular warmth that comes when people gather to remember someone good. I was in the kitchen when James Calloway found me. He was holding a folder. "Diana," he said quietly, "do you have a moment?" Something in his voice made me go very still. "What is that?" I asked. He glanced around. "Maybe somewhere more private." I looked at the folder in his hand. "Here is fine," I said. He hesitated, then opened it. Inside were documents, legal documents, property transfer papers, for my father's land. My mouth went dry. "What is this?" I said slowly. "A transfer agreement," James said carefully, "for the Holloway property. Your father's estate will need to be settled quickly to avoid probate complications, and we thought—" "Who thought?" He paused. "Richard and my father have been discussing this for some time. Given the location of the property, Calloway Properties is prepared to offer a very generous—" "Where is Richard?" I said. My voice came out very calm, frighteningly calm. "I found him in my father's study, standing with Harold Calloway near my father's desk. 2 other men I didn't recognize, lawyers I assumed." Richard looked up when I walked in. For just 1 second, something crossed his face. Not guilt, not regret. Calculation. "Diana," he said smoothly, "come sit down. We were just—" "I saw the papers," I said. Silence. Harold Calloway spoke first. His voice was measured and careful. "Diana, we understand this is a difficult time, but practically speaking, that land has been sitting unused for decades. We can turn it into something significant. The offer we're prepared to make is extremely—" "Did you already sign something?" I asked Richard. He met my eyes. "I signed as your legal representative," he said. "As your husband, I have the right to—" "You don't," I said. He frowned. "Diana, that land was left to me specifically," I said. "In my father's will, in my name only. You have no legal authority over it." A flicker of something crossed his face. "We had the will reviewed," Harold said smoothly. "Given that you are married under Tennessee law—" "I know Tennessee law," I said quietly. The room went still. What Richard did not know, what none of them knew, was that 3 months before my father passed, when I had started noticing Richard's comments about the land, I had made a phone call to an estate attorney. I had spent 2 weeks quietly, carefully, legally ensuring that my father's land was placed into a trust, in my name only, protected, untouchable by anyone, including my husband. My father had signed every document himself, witnessed, notarized, filed. I looked at Richard. "The land is in a protected trust," I said, "filed 3 months ago. Your signatures, whatever James brought today, are worth nothing." The color left Richard's face. Harold stepped forward. "That's not possible. We had the estate—" "Reviewed by your lawyers," I said, "who were looking at the old documents, not the trust filing." I reached into my jacket pocket and placed a single document on my father's desk. "You can have your lawyers verify it," I said. "It won't change anything." Silence. Complete, total, suffocating silence. Richard stared at the document, then at me. "Diana," he said, his voice had changed now, the smoothness gone, something raw underneath. "I did this for us. That land could have—" "You did this on the day of my father's funeral," I said. He stopped. "With papers already prepared," I continued, "lawyers already present." He looked at the floor. "You planned this. For how long?" No answer. "How long, Richard?" Still nothing. I picked up the document from the desk. "My father told me something the day he died," I said quietly. Richard looked up. He said, "Don't let anyone take your foundation." I held his gaze for a long moment. "I won't." I walked out of that study, back through the house, past the neighbors and the food and the quiet conversations. I found my mother's sister, my Aunt Carol, in the living room, the person who had known my family longer than anyone. I sat beside her and took her hand. "I need you to stay with me tonight," I said. She looked at my face and understood immediately. "I'm not going anywhere," she said. The divorce was filed the following Monday. My attorney moved quickly. The trust documents were airtight. The land was never at risk. Richard's family's attempt to transfer the property was rejected completely. Calloway Properties lost 2 major municipal contracts that quarter, after certain details about Harold Calloway's business practices became part of the public divorce record. The 12 acres outside Nashville are still mine. I go there sometimes on quiet mornings. I stand on the land my great-grandfather worked, the land my father protected, the land that is and will always be my foundation. I don't think about Richard much anymore, but when I do, I think about something my father said once when I was young and someone at school had been unkind to me. "Diana," he said, "small people always reach for things that belong to others because they have nothing of their own worth keeping." He was right. He was always right. I would rather stand alone on 12 acres of honest ground than build a life on someone else's lies.